Hey guys, so the video you're watching probably demonetized already. Just letting you know that we're on Patreon, patreon.com/Pantelis. Get yourself some exclusive content, bonus podcasts. We have stuff early up there. There's also episodes that you can only catch on the Patreon, patreon.com/Pantelis.
I take you for a ride on the devil's ship. I'll take you for a ride where you sink or swim. Now come with me and let this story begin.
Pantelis, how you doing?
Viva, we're back. It's been a minute, and you've come at the worst time in this year's history.
It is. Madness is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Listening to Justin Trudeau give his. I didn't see the whole interview with Rosemary Barton in the Olympic Stadium, as if that's probably the most iconic place for a useless, corrupt government to give a speech to its corrupt media that it pays to promote its message. Setting that aside, hey, we know it works. Let's continue doing what we've been doing for 2 years. By the way, we have record numbers and we need to hunker down again. So it's been working. Keep doing it, but it's not working. We have record numbers and we just got to go back and do it again in Canada and in the province.
Yeah, Arruda said something similar. He said, we know that vaccinations work and that's what curbs the spread, which is why we're at 95% and we need to lock down again so we can stop the curve. I was like, well, didn't you just see that the vaccinations are what's stopping the... So what's happening? What are we doing?
Well, we'll start on one premise that we can all accept, I think, or that we probably can agree to accept, is that vaccination, by and large, seems to have milder symptoms for those who contract it. That's
Correct.
fine.
We're seeing this.
That I think we can all agree with. What we have a problem with, anybody with half a brain, is that if the vaccinated can still carry, transmit, and contract the virus, the vaccine passport makes no sense.
Completely useless.
Absolutely useless, considering that the venues that have been imposing a vaccine passport are now getting shut down. So from a civil perspective, we did what the government asked. We went 70% will go back to normal. Now we're at 80+%, and they're shutting things down again. The very venues that imposed this divisive, unconstitutional vaccine passport, and people are like, okay, I'll do it. I don't want to judge people. I don't think people are idiots. I don't think they're stupid. I think people are just, at this point, an abused partner who is just so tormented by their abuser, that being the government, they will do whatever they say in the hopes of diminishing future abuse.
Now, I don't know if this was done on purpose, but there's something that I find is very stressful for people, and I don't know if they've done this purposely, is that they've announced lockdowns, they've announced that people who work in restaurants won't have a job starting yesterday, all that, and they have not announced a new CERB or a new plan of action to give people money if they're not actually working. So now everyone's stressed because, like, wait, I'm not allowed to make money, but how am I going to put food on the table? So is that legal, though? Can they close everything down without giving people money?
First of all, I don't think they could legally close things down, period. I mean,
so we've gone past that point.
I said it a year ago. Like, the idea of a lockdown is not a legitimate form of government anywhere except North Korea, and I won't even say China anymore, because I have a high school buddy, I think I mentioned it a while back, messaging me from China saying, what is going on in Canada? We're not even doing this here. We don't have these measures. We don't have these face mask mandates. We don't have lockdowns. I mean, the idea
what do they know that we don't?
Well, I think, what do they know? That even communist dictatorships have their limits, but when it's done in the name of democracy, it's limitless. I mean, these were unconstitutional measures, in my humble opinion, from the very beginning. Yeah. They were never legitimate forms of government for any free government, free and democratic society. Can you imagine curfews, lockdowns, shutdowns, mask mandates, vaccine mandates? But we've gotten so used to it, just like inch by inch, 2 weeks, 2 months. Well, once we're here, let's push a little further. I mean, Jordan Peterson just did a great one. I don't know where he said it, but it's how it works. Push a little bit, push a little bit, push a little bit until there's pushback. Stop, wait, start again. And that is exactly how you eventually just keep pushing people further and further back, and they forgot what they objected to at the very beginning.
But what's the end goal here? How is this helping anything? The economy is in shambles. People are upset. How does this help anything?
It is not conspiratorial to say that it helps the political class and it helps big business and big pharma. I mean,
yeah, big pharma's cashing in. That's obvious. We know this.
Well, big pharma's cashing in off taxpayer dollars. Government is just creating endless work for itself. I mean, the government now has created a reason for its own existence. If you solve the problem, you got to contract government. You got to take back some of these powers. The government, whether or not you think they're evil, they're cloaking or doing whatever they're doing under the guise of benevolence. But they are the proverbial blob from that 1970s horror movie. They keep growing, and they never want to get smaller again because it means starving itself a little bit. So who benefits from all of this? Definitely not the working class. Definitely the government. Definitely the state. Definitely the political elites who will suffer zero consequences from any of this and haven't suffered any consequences. Big pharma, big tech, and the rest of us don't even have the means to protest anymore because, I mean, they've also literally banned protest. Nova Scotia did it over the summer. Quebec passed a law banning protest outside of hospitals. I don't morally condone protesting outside of hospitals.
You could protest somewhere else.
Protest somewhere you could, but to pass a law now saying you can't protest COVID outside of hospitals, but you could protest other stuff. You
can still protest other stuff outside of hospitals. That's
for sure.
Still fine.
They carved out an exception for employees, for the unions. And for schools, same carve out. So teachers can protest their own conditions outside the school, but if it relates to COVID, parents can't protest for better air quality in schools outside of the schools.
Oh, now that doesn't make sense to me. I thought it was in general you can't disturb the kids or the hospitals.
No, it was protesting COVID measures.
See, I didn't know this.
Yeah, I read the stupid bill.
Interesting.
By the way, the government goes 2 years with emergency health orders, doesn't pass any of them through the legislative process, doesn't do a vaccine passport through the legislative process. François Legault doesn't want to expose the population to misinformation. But when it comes time to jam through legislation to prohibit protesting for COVID measures, there they find the time to do it. Short law, passed overnight, and that's it.
So speaking of misinformation, right now I see like with Rogan and everyone that went to visit him and the monoclonal antibody treatment and all that. So there are treatments that we're not even considering here. They're not even talked about. But if you're a U.S. citizen and you have enough money, you get a free pass. I don't get it.
It is.
So they exist, but they exist for some, not for others.
And here's where I go out of my way to remind everyone, I'm not a doctor. I don't give the medical advice. I listened to the Joe Rogan, Peter McCullough interview. I found certain things to be eye-opening. I find Peter McCullough as a medical expert to be sufficiently, to have a sufficient expertise that he would be recognized as an expert in a court.
I don't trust doctors. I only trust vets.
Well, I don't even trust vets. They have, that is a make money industry. I do trust vets, but
not all vets. Not by the way, a little side note. Don't trust all vets. It took me a while to find a good one. I don't even trust because I go to 2 different vets. I don't even trust one of them.
It's an industry as well. I mean, it's all an industry.
Don't feed your pets regular dog food or cat food. That shit is poison.
I wouldn't say poison. It's filler. And my dogs are on a raw beef diet, and you see the way the poop actually changes. Like
their attitude, their energy. Because you know what that shit is? Like feeding your kid hot dogs all the time.
Effectively, it's like the bun. Maybe not even the protein of the bread of the dog itself, but. What were we just talking about? 2 seconds. The doctor.
Yeah.
So the treatments, I hear people talking about monoclonal antibodies, the I word, the HCQ. I've heard people talking about it. I listened to what Peter McCullough says. And the one thing that I did find fascinatingly interesting, setting aside what he described as the overt government suppression of the I word, that's one of the medicines. I don't know if we can say it here.
Ivermectin.
So
this is my show. This is a free show.
The suppression of ivermectin, what he described as burning down of pharmaceutical places in foreign countries. I mean, I don't know of any of that. But the idea that there's no treatment, that they basically say, go home and get so sick that by the time you come back, there's virtually nothing we can do, as opposed to treating it early with treatments that we know exist, which we know the toxicity levels of which are, if you're balancing risk-reward, probably more reward than any risk for these drugs when you're in that situation. But when he described it as go home, wait for it to be so serious that when you come back to the hospital, you're done for anyhow.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. To not talk about any treatments
that people have used and are using,
and that when you talk about them, it gets censored and it gets suppressed because one can only imagine why. So,
but the Prime Minister of in England, he went through it. Trump had those treatments.
Rogan.
The President of the United States, Rogan.
Tim Pool, most recently.
Aaron Rodgers. Whoever. There's a list of people who have gone through. That's what shocks me. This isn't experimental shit. This is the people are using.
And which is why also I try to call out in as much as they'll ever respond, politicians and celebs on Twitter. Oh, I got COVID. I'd like to thank the vaccine for its efficacy and yada, yada, yada. I say, okay, good. Are you getting any treatments? And if you are, let us know. Because if you're getting treatments that are either not available for reasons of politics or not available for reasons of economics to the majority of Americans, you might be a filthy hypocrite, and you might need to disclose that hypocrisy to the people who elected you. But no, there are, I don't know if you call them treatments, early interventions, which, by and large from people who are smarter and have degrees seem to work. Why are they not made publicly available? Why are they not discussed? Why are they actually actively suppressed? Listen to Joe Rogan and Peter McCullough talk about it, and you'll get one version. Yeah.
The only thing I hear people talk about is imbeciles that talk about oregano oil. That's it. I just hear hippies like, you just need some oregano. It's like, all right, you need to shut up, bro.
Well, I've heard
you're gonna get the measles too.
Well, the funny thing is though, there are a number of people who are anti or who are hesitant to the vaccine, but then we'll really go out and try some funky stuff like order medications from pharmaceutical companies in different countries. There's an interplay there, but
they're contrarians. I think some people just want to go against it because it's available and the government is pushing it and all that. So like, fuck this, I'm going to find my own. I understand being hesitant in general. That I can accept. But if it's just because someone you don't like said it, sometimes even a broken clock is right. Twice a day. So,
and this is what McCullough explored with Joe Rogan. Is like in the early days when they were banning ivermectin and demonizing anyone who mentioned it, and then it became political when Trump. Oh, I think this was more hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, hydroxychloroquine. When politics gets involved, it ruins everything. But when you realize that there are all these political forces at play to exploit certain situations or even not intervene to minimize it, the world is a disgusting, horrible place sometimes, and it's tough not to take the proverbial black pill suppository. But Peter McCullough might give you a bit of a black pill in this, but when you reach up, I don't know how many people watch Joe Rogan's shows. I know he's got 100 million followers on Spotify. People are realizing this now, and with any luck, there'll be a change in the ballot box, but some people don't even trust
but
that.
By then, till we get there, we still got some problems ahead of us. And I'm wondering, so right now, given that they don't care about what the laws are, they're going to lock down where they want to lock down, and it's kind of arbitrary, the reasoning behind it. Especially when they keep mentioning that the hospitals are still overrun, they're understaffed and underfunded, but they've done nothing in the past 2 years to staff or fund these hospitals, which is another, it doesn't feel nefarious to me, it feels incompetent. You see there's a bottleneck, you see there's an issue somewhere, try to alleviate some of it, and don't alleviate it by blocking everyone else from using it or needing it. That's not...
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. I don't know if it's incompetence or nefarious. But incompetence becomes nefarious when you try to cover up the incompetence. And what you might have here is a government which might have been incompetent. It's been decades that we've had problems with the healthcare system, but you might have a government which is now trying to conceal that, and in order to conceal it, violating every constitutional right we ever had. And then it becomes nefarious because instead of just admitting we have a problem, we've been messing it up left, right, and center. Now we need to lock you down, lock you in your homes, shut your business down, lie to you to take this vaccine, not once, not twice, get boosted in order to open up. And then lo and behold, oh my God, it's worse than ever. We're locking down after you've done everything. So it may start off as incompetence, but it becomes nefarious when they try to conceal their incompetence. And I'm not even sure that it was incompetence at the beginning. A lot of people are making a lot of money with what the government's doing right now, but it certainly isn't the general population.
No, the general population is suffering. I've been speaking to people for a couple of days now. They're just stressed out about everything. And again, this is why so I heard something recently. We brought it up on another podcast a few days ago. Well, I guess I'll keep him nameless because he's not a political guy and doesn't want to be known. But there's a funeral parlor, and it was talking about how they haven't dealt with this many deaths and funerals in a long time. He goes, it's fucking crazy. Business technically is booming. And I'm running out of staff. People are overworked and they're getting pissed off. But what do you want me to do? People are dying. Mm-hmm. He goes, but the shocking part isn't the deaths, he goes. It's because you'd assume that they're COVID deaths, he goes. But it's not that's shocking, because I've never seen this many suicides.
This is another thing you can't even talk about.
But that's, so when it was brought up, Poseidon was the one who was the most shocked about it. He's like, well, why isn't this being talked about? Like, there's no stats like on the news. I can't find it. And then I tried to explain to him, I go, it kind of I'm not saying it's good to not share this information, but it kind of makes sense that they don't share it because
you don't want to encourage it.
Not just you don't want to encourage it, but also already people are depressed and sad. If you start telling them, by the way, record numbers of people are killing themselves.
Well, this is, I at one point mentioned this and people say, well, suicide's not contagious. So, it's a separate issue. First of all, from a phenomenological perspective or a human perspective, suicide has been contagious, like spiritually, psychologically contagious, where you do get, bouts or spurs of suicide within a community. people get influenced by other people's suicides to do it. So it's contagious in a spiritual sense, not a physical one, obviously. You got the Virgin Suicides, which was a novel, but the idea is that it's why you don't publicize suicides, because it does encourage other people who were thinking about it to do it. From the beginning of this, I said, this is where my stubbornness will come in. I will never believe that suicides have gone down.
They started trying to say that, yeah.
CBC has said it about a year ago. They said it so early that it's one of those statements that, they don't even have the information to say the statement. So it's either an overt lie or it's, they're just saying something that is unsubstantiated, which makes it dishonest. Now I've been looking into it a little bit. And the way I see that they might be getting around it is overall suicides have gone down because the bulk of suicides typically are a different demographic than where we're seeing now a 30% increase. So
technically,
knowing how numbers can get fudged, if you say the bulk of suicides is men 35 to 50, but now we're seeing 30% increases in minority communities, in young people. So all you have to do is sort of like bring down the bulk number a little bit so it'll compensate for the spike in a different demographic. And how can you do that? Reallocate deaths. Oh, that wasn't a suicide, that was an overdose. That wasn't a suicide, that was an accidental discharge. And I'm not saying they're doing this. I'm just saying that, knowing
they can.
How corrupt the world is, it's so easy to do. Which is why I'm not so much interested in suicides per se, but distress deaths, what I would call distress deaths. Drug overdoses, behavior that is recklessly dangerous because people are in despair. That's the number I want to know. But what I do know now is a year later, they are recognizing 30% increase in suicides in, I think it was, I don't say children, but 12 to 25 minority communities, indigenous communities, people who are suffering the most as a result of these unscientific, totally abusive, psychologically distressing government measures. So they can fudge those numbers. And if even they say it stayed the same, check which demographics have had the spike, and then just ask yourself how they could very easily tinker with a few numbers, tinker with a few criteria to bring down what is statistically the biggest number of the bunch so they can compensate for the increase.
So I'm in the beginning when this first started, I think a year something ago, when it was October, right before they announced the first, a few months before they announced the first curfews. Remember? It was brought up and it was October and we were talking about it because I think people around us, it was very close to us. So we're like, that's strange. A lot more, and no one's talking about it. And it had some comedians that were discussing it. So it was kind of, it was out there. Then it just stopped, and I'm guilty of it too. I completely forgot about it. And until this was brought up a few days ago, I hadn't even thought about looking into it. And when the guy's like, they're overworked, they don't know what to do because I've never seen this. I'm worried about young people. I've never seen this many suicides. I was like, wait, is that a statistic? Like, I haven't seen that shit anywhere. And unless there's someone inside that sees it and tells you, you never hear about it publicly. But from what you said, I do understand hiding it in the sense that you don't want to motivate people because it's not the way out. Like, if anyone's thinking about that now, none of this shit is final. None of this shit is going to last. You have to find a way to stay positive and get out of it. But I get where they don't want to motivate people to kill themselves.
Absolutely. I've mentioned it on some of my streams a couple times, but I've had two, in the context of my profession, two people commit suicide, and like it's the most distressing thing ever. It's traumatizing for everyone involved. So
one of our fans did that like a month ago.
Yeah, it's and you just, in as much despair as there is, and as much despair as you have, the idea, just wait one more day, you can always do it. So wait one more day and talk to someone in the meantime, because it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, which some people say is the purpose, but it is wait one more day and talk to someone, and someone meaningful, not, I don't know how these, I don't know who, if you go ask anyone for advice, you might get bad advice, but reach out to someone close and just, hold off. Now I forgot my thought there, but I don't say they're hiding the number. They're definitely not talking about it, and I don't draw the anecdotal stuff. Anecdotally, I've known now first or second degree connections, more people who have died from that than from COVID. And there's only so much a spirit can take. There's only so much people can take before they break one way or the other. Yeah. And 2 years into this, having your life upended, having the government basically use you like a ragdoll puppet to tell you what to do, when you can do it, what you can do with your own body, failing which they come down with an iron fist. They either crush you economically with $1,000 ticket, or they lock you up in, solitary because it's COVID and you can't, even once you're locked up, like Pastor Coates. put them in solitary because COVID measures.
None of this. But by the way, so they're saying when you get back, because they asked people don't travel. There's gonna be. I canceled my trip to the U.S. Because I did not want to come back, and they said maybe if you come back, number one, if you test positive, they might not even let you in.
Well, they might not.
They put you in a government facility for 14 days. And for me, I already said if I come back to that, you're not going to know me as I'm going to jail for sure because there's going to be a murder. Because if you put me in a prison for 14 days and I've committed no crime, instead of me going home because I'm sick or whatever, there's no way I'm staying in there normally.
There was it was in, I forget if it was in New Zealand or Australia. I want to say New Zealand. Suicide, triple murder suicide. A mother, doctor, killed her kids, then killed herself just after being released from 2-week quarantine upon return. Someone can maybe, I don't know if Poseidon's the fact checker there, but it was
Poseidon's normally the fact checker.
It was a doctor was in quarantine with her 3 kids. Obviously, the story fell out of the news. I mean, it made it for a bit, and then that's it because I think no one wants to talk about it. But
very depressing.
I
didn't hear about it, but it sounds super depressing.
And I read the details, but they give you very few details. To me, it just sounds like someone absolutely snapped. But maybe there was more to the story.
Well, imagine being a doctor in all this, and you're in a forced quarantine facility for 14 days. You got some yappy kids.
It is. Look, I've been locked down with our kids for 2 years now.
It checks out.
It's endless stress, but there's a snapping point where I can imagine, and I say I'm not traveling because I'm not going to a government facility ever.
Yeah.
And knowing what goes on there, I mean, we've seen the videos. They're lacking food, they're lacking staff. There were sexual assaults at a couple of them.
Look at me. They're gonna try to rape me.
No.
Look at
it is. Not that, well, you're a big man. You can defend yourself, but they send. There was the Australian woman. Can you imagine being a young woman and you're just left to the devices of the government? Like the government, they're not to be trusted. It's not a conspiracy to say this. We have the current government apologizing for atrocities committed by previous governments as recently as the 90s with the residential schools.
Actually, that was 2000s, early 2000s.
So you imagine this, like you're telling me to trust this government, which is apologizing for atrocities committed by the same government barely 2 decades ago. You're telling me now to trust Big Pharma, the same Big Pharma, Pfizer, that just paid out they paid out the biggest settlement in the toxic baby powder lawsuit. They paid out criminal fines for knowingly allowing their toxic medicines to be sold and cause heart. They pay these criminal fines, and now you are to shut up and go to one of these government facilities and just trust the staff, just trust the government. You're supposed to now just shut up and take the drugs from these pharmaceutical companies that just paid out billions in damages because they were knowingly selling toxic products. And I'm the idiot. I'm the conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, that's another thing is people don't want to admit the second people do something, they have to justify it. So I've made many mistakes in my life. And I'm like, well, that was a bad move. But now I feel like I'm in the minority because most people don't want to admit, even owners of businesses who complied as much as they could, and now they're getting fucked over again, even though they complied fully. There's like, well, maybe it's, just trust. It's just one more. One more.
I have discussions with people who still believe the government is genuinely looking out for them and genuinely cares about them. And I say
the government doesn't care about anyone. But that's not because they're nefarious. It can't care. The entity, the way it exists, it can't care for anyone because it cares for itself. It needs to survive. So in order to survive, it's going to have to do some things, not always nefarious, but just stupid. For example, creating jobs that aren't real jobs. When they want to pretend like they created jobs, what the government will do is they will, let's say they'll add another 1,000 positions, 100 to the census. Well, now they're not real fucking jobs. That doesn't help in anything.
I'll go one step further.
Yeah.
The government is not my father.
Exactly.
The only people I trust to actually care for my best interests are family and people who I have entrusted with that obligation, not people who have systematically violated the rights of citizens since it's been around. I mean, the government is not to be trusted; it is to be controlled. And right now, it is out of control. Yeah. And people, I like to say, that people have already sacrificed so much they cannot bring themselves to admit that they were duped. They can't bring themselves to admit that the government is either incompetent or corrupt or a combination of both. So when they said 2 weeks to flatten the curve 2 years ago, they were either wrong or lying.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They didn't know what's going on. Neither did we. They thought maybe it'll take 2 weeks. I'll allow it.
You know what? And then if you watch some of these medical forums from prior years where they're discussing global responses to pandemics.
That's weird. Every time I see shit like that, because he'll send me all the conspiracy videos, and I'll be like, that is weird.
It is weird. So do I think that Fauci did not know that face masks are useful under certain circumstances, but useless under others? Do I think that they don't know that slapping on a moldy, even worse, a neck warmer, just cover your mouth with something, it's science. I mean, do I think that they didn't know certain things about this virus at the beginning that they didn't share? I mean, if Trudeau was donating our PPE to China, obviously they knew certain things might help. And
now,
if he's...
I will say one thing. Fauci, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he the same guy who said during the AIDS crisis,
you can get it in your kitchen?
You can get it in your kitchen, and also that, in 10 years, everyone's going to have AIDS? He's that guy.
I don't know about that. I do know that the level of fear-mongering that he brought about for the AIDS crisis rivals what he's doing now.
Yeah.
The level of his wrongness in that rivals the level of his wrongness now. Back in the early days of this, in 2020, he did an interview with Zuckerberg where he said, it's entirely conceivable that the vaccine actually makes people sick because it happened with the AIDS. It happened with the HIV epidemic. So this guy knows he'll suck and blow and he'll say, the vaccines were 100% efficacy, 90%. It'll go down over time.
And then he'll say, it could make you sick. However, it won't make you sick. Like, well, why are you saying two different things?
It could make you sick. We've seen it before, but we're mandating it for the rest of for the entire population now. And now some people are going to say, we got past that point where we knew it wasn't going to make you sick. So he's comfortable with the new vaccine, saying it's been the case with other vaccines, but we're past that point now. Now we know it's not going to make you sick. To which I'll say, thank you. The critical part of my brain says the mRNA technology that is being used for this massive vaccination has not been around long enough for Fauci to say we know definitively that what we have seen with other vaccines cannot occur with this vaccine. He cannot say that.
This is true because we don't have time. However, we don't have like the time span to... Do you think, though, they would risk this since it's mass vaccination across the planet? Do you think they would risk it where, one day everyone just drops dead and the world ends?
Yeah, it doesn't happen like that. And mRNA technology, and this is, again, I'm just repeating what smarter people have mentioned, including my wife, who's a neuroscientist, like mRNA as a technology.
We should have her on. If anybody knows about this, it's her.
Well, she's not.
We're just two dumbasses.
She's not an epidemiologist, but mRNA technology has been around for a while. But this is the first time it's been introduced into vaccine technology. So there's an issue. You balance off the risks. Who's really at risk, and what is the risk for an 80-year-old to try this? And it was called an experimental vaccine, the EUA. What was the risk versus the reward for them? But that changes as you go down. But as we're now going further along, we're going now from who is most at risk, who needs to take these chances or balance the risks, to who is not at risk, but now vaccinate 5 to 11-year-olds.
So this is something that if I talk about it, only parents now are starting to get on my side. But I was saying from the beginning, this is what's strange to me is they're forcing it on the kids, right? This is where it starts seeming suspicious. Unless I'm misreading the stats, statistically, weren't they the ones that were supposed to outlast all of us in the sense that they were not the danger category at all? So if the general population was 99% and higher that were safe, in kids it was even higher than that, and yet it doesn't make sense.
Pantelis, 0.00005 fatality rates.
Okay, so
of anyone under 19, and I suspect.
So am I crazy for saying that this is a step that doesn't make any sense?
The argument is going to be...
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay, the argument was...
I'm willing to listen.
Me too, and I heard the argument, but we know that it's not true now. The argument was get the kids vaccinated so it will stop the spread from kids to adults.
But the vaccine doesn't do that.
Well, but now that we know it, but the vaccine, we can agree, probably causes milder symptoms. So now vaccinate the kids, although it doesn't. If they get it, they'll have milder symptoms. Okay,
but they already had mild symptoms.
They 300. Last I checked, 300,000 cases of COVID in Canada, 19 and under. Do you know how many deaths resulted?
No.
Take a wild guess without doing the math too quickly.
1.
15. 15, and at least one of which we now know was that 14-year-old with stage 4 brain cancer that they include. I mean, once you know that they include at least one kid like that, you can question the remaining 15.
They did apologize for that one.
Because they got caught. I mean, they apologize when they get caught.
Yeah, initially they argued it, and then when it was undeniable,
Hinshaw denied it, argued it, then apologized. But
we talked about that on the podcast because I was wrong too. I thought, oh no, it's fake, it's conspiracy, and then people sent me the links.
No, because I got messages from people, and then the alleged sister put out a social media post, but you can't take everything.
That's why I thought it was fake. Yeah,
but once you know that they've done it once, they've done it before, and they've done it also. You know that they've done it with other demographics, but even still, just assume all 15 of those cases were spontaneous, only because of that is 15 out of 300,000 cases. And then you go into what are now being documented side effects, not just of this vaccine, but any vaccine. And you can no longer talk about the spike in cases of myocarditis among young kids or among athletes. You can't talk about it. And if you do, you're a conspiracy theorist. And then they try to write it off. Mild myocarditis. I've listened to doctors. There's really no such thing as mild myocarditis. It's a problem.
That's a mild heart attack.
Heart inflammation is a problem. Yeah. And when you listen to Peter McCullough with Joe Rogan, any of these stats that would have, if we had gotten these stats with any other vaccine through the vaccine adverse effect reporting system, they would have pulled it by any objective metrics. And now you can't even talk about it. You can't even suggest it on social media because they'll block you, ban you, or whatever. And you're just supposed to live with these mild myocarditis of a demographic that does not need this. And the push is so in your face. It's so egregious. And then to say, if you don't get vaccinated and you're 13 years old, you can't go to coffee shops. You can't go to movie theaters. You can't live a normal existence.
Can't play soccer.
Can't play soccer. And now in order to be part of active life, which is exactly what reduces your risk of succumbing any serious consequences of the illness, you need to get vaccinated. It was never before. I always say that, but child sacrifice has always been around. But everyone has gotten so tormented with fear, they will do anything to feel safe. And you got old people out there who are saying, I am so terrified, you can't come over unless you're vaccinated, or you can't come over with your kids because your kids are going to get me sick even though I'm vaccinated and get me.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. If we're assuming what we're being told, if we're assuming certain things, the vaccine reduces the symptoms. You don't, and you could still get it and you could still transmit it. Yeah. The fact that I might have it and still give it to you,
that shouldn't be your fear. That's why
your symptoms will be better and mine will be worse. And that is typically how individual responsibility worked in life. I'll take my own risks.
A lot of people around me I've noticed, well, some of them, like one in particular last week who had asked me a question, I was like, fuck, this guy's an imbecile. Because everyone around is fully vaccinated. And he just wanted to double check. He's like, are the people at the studio, is everyone there double vaccinated? I go, well, look, I can't give you the medical status of my fucking employees, but you could pretty much guess because you see us everywhere at fucking events, bars, all that. So you pretty much fucking know without me overtly telling you that they're vaccinated. And also, even if they weren't, dickhead, you got vaccinated for a reason.
But can you, and this individual is middle-aged, 30, 40?
40s.
Relatively healthy?
Yeah.
People are deranged. They're deranged because they have no apportionment of actual risk versus perceived risk. It's like, if one person dies, it may as well be the same as 1,000 people dying. And
I'm not going to say his name because people in my universe know him, but because I don't think he announced it yet, but one of our comedian friends tested positive, so he has to stay in for the next couple of days. And I was talking to him the other day and I go, so what's going on with you? Are you going to come to the studio? He goes, I can't, man. I tested positive. I got to stay in for 14 days. I said, how do you feel? He goes, I'm going to be honest with you. He goes, if this was 2019, I'd be working right now. Because that's how strong he has flu symptoms, but he goes at the level where I'd be at work right now if it was pre-COVID.
I was just thinking, I was looking back on those Dr. Mom ads, like moms don't get a day off from the 80s and the 90s. Where like, he is sniffling, coughing, high fever, take medicine and go back to work. We have now gotten into, we have allowed this to happen. The government has weaponized the sniffles. It's not even weaponizing active cases of confirmed COVID. It's weaponizing the sniffles. You're sniffling, quarantine until you.
But women aren't a good example because you said the mom. Women will probably continue going to work if they get a gunshot wound. Their moms, they're way different. Yeah.
No, the ads were different. It was the mom doctor. Mom never gets a day off, and it was the dad's always a whiny baby anyhow. So give him the medication so he can feel better.
Even that's stereotypical. In my experience, it's pretty real.
Well, it was almost. It was. except nobody wants to get sick. And when I saw someone's like, stay away from me if you're sick. But we've weaponized the cold where psychologically, ask yourself what 2 years of this type of stress does to your immune system in general. I got the sniffles. I'm going to die. I'm 40 years old. Even if I had underlying conditions, it's still, infinitesimal, but healthy people have been traumatized to literally feel like to get the sniffles, you think you're going to die right away. It's psychological torture. But it makes for people easy to manipulate for policy, and it makes for, a government easy to exploit. I said this, I just realized it the other day. COVID is the best thing that could have ever happened to Justin Trudeau. We don't talk about charity scandals. Yeah. We don't talk about Aga Khan. We don't talk about SNC Lavalin. We don't talk about the budget balancing itself. Justin Trudeau has gone from a corrupt, incompetent prime minister, he still is, but to someone who thinks he is quite literally our father, out there to protect us, out there to make all of our personal decisions because he knows what's best for us, even if it violates our constitutional rights. The COVID crisis is the best thing ever that could have happened to Justin Trudeau in power. Because he's created a panic that will keep him in office pretty much indefinitely.
I don't understand how people get so indoctrinated they don't want a difference they don't want a change in government. That's what shocks me is you've seen that a lot of our planning here doesn't work. But then again, in their defense, we don't have many choices.
No, who are you going to do? Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah, he's a tool.
I'm not sure if he's better or worse than Trudeau in that he's a turncoat. At least
I think
Trudeau,
they might be the same.
Well, no, Trudeau has always been pretty transparent with his corruption in a sense. Aaron O'Toole, alleged conservative, pro-vaccine passport, firing members of his own party or kicking them out because they don't share their policy, because they won't disclose their vax status. I mean, Aaron O'Toole is compromised. Justin Trudeau has just always been corrupt.
I don't want to know anyone's vaccine status. I don't give a shit. I never asked.
None of my business. Yeah. And I mean, God forbid someone asks me, I say, what? Mind your own business. Like I've discussed mine. I've discussed my rationale for why I did it. But mind your own effing business. Do you want to tell me if you have herpes? Because in theory, if I go to eat at somebody's house, I'd like to know if they've had herpes. Because
I'd like to know that.
Yeah, I'm going to eat off your cutlery. There's a 1 in a million chance that I take your. We have now weaponized the cold, weaponized the common cold, weaponized the sniffles. We have now also created a world where people think they are entitled to your detailed, confidential medical status. And if you don't tell them, you must be a right-wing extremist. And meanwhile, the people making these rules flaunt them. Is it flout or flaunt?
Flaunt.
Flaunt them, with unapologetically until they get caught. Which, can lead you to ask one of two questions. Do they know that they are stupid measures and they're only to control the population, or do they just not care? I mean, what do they know that allows them to do what they're telling us not to do?
What do you think is people's breaking point?
I don't know. I don't like talking about it because I don't like...
I think I might be wrong, but I think we're at the limit now. If they do another curfew, another lockdown, I feel like there might be a tiny revolution. People are like, all right, this is clearly bullshit at this point.
This is the thing. It's everything has been weaponized. So even discussing certain things can be weaponized. And the government, an incident would be exactly what they would need to say, great, now we get to come in with the military. Which is why I say the people, these savages don't understand.
What about China? China, are they doing booster shots? What's the deal there? What about Sweden? I never hear about Sweden anymore. Didn't they say they didn't care about getting vaccinated?
You don't hear about Sweden. You don't hear about Texas anymore. You don't hear about Florida anymore. And until there's an incident, they don't talk about it.
Unless there's a Florida man story.
Do you remember when they lifted the mask mandate in Texas and everyone's going to die?
I too believed it was going to get bad. I'm going to tell you right now.
And after the protest, the mass protest, super spreader events, nothing, and it doesn't happen. They stop talking about it, and then they'll go and they'll wait for a 14-year-old boy with stage 4 brain cancer to die to say, look how dangerous this is. A 14-year-old kid just died from it. It's but the breaking point, I don't know where it is. I don't know what it looks like when it happens. But I can guarantee you that any remote lawlessness will be fully exploited by these fascist governments to further empower them to be more fascist.
So what about this Ron DeSantis guy?
He seemed the most politically courageous individual.
Because he always seemed a little goofy to me, but I like that he stands up for people's rights.
Can you imagine they call him the fascist for saying that you cannot mandate compelled medical intervention?
Yeah,
on
nobody
kids?
knows what fascist means anymore.
In truth, I have to look up the definition because I don't know what it means either, really. I mean, is it the merger of media, government, and big tech? I mean, that's typically been the definition.
Yeah, and
is it just someone who's an authoritarian
no,
that does not
that's
care
something
about...
different. Fascist, you're more close to the first one.
Okay, so I might be using the term improperly, but they called Trump a dictator, a man who got censored and booted off of a social media platform, then elected out of office.
You can't do that to dictators.
You can't do that to dictators. They called DeSantis a dictator for wanting to prevent compelled medical intervention for children. It's 1984. Freedom is slavery, war is peace, ignorance is strength. I mean, it is literally the words are being used to represent the exact opposite. He is a fascist dictator because he wants to preserve your rights to not be compelled to undergo a medical intervention. It's nonsense. But he's doing good work, and it's an interesting thing. People are moving to Florida. They're leaving California. Yeah. And typically when people leave California, they drive their stuff across the country, and then they have someone who's moving from Florida to California to drive those trucks back to get them there, except it's one way these days.
No one's going to California.
No one's going back. And like this is how you notice that there's an exodus and there's an influx, and the real estate prices in Florida, Miami are a good indication. But it's trucks coming from California to Florida, and there's not anybody going back to California.
Well, it's a shithole right now, right?
No comment. I got family there. It's not a place I would ever live. And the problem is it's beautiful. It's
very beautiful.
The 101 it's the most beautiful road in the world that I've seen. The beaches are magnificent. The weather is beautiful, but the politics ruin everything. I went to Venice Beach the last time I was there, which was 3 or 4 years ago. Unsafe is an understatement as to how I felt compared to the last time I had gone there, which was 10 years before. It's just, it's falling apart. It's falling apart because it's unsustainable. The government, like the proverbial blob, gets so big, there's nothing left to eat, and then it eventually just dies. But meanwhile, there's a lot of people caught up in that mess.
What do you think of this Elon Musk situation happening, that Elizabeth Warren and other people are attacking him for taxes?
Yeah, he tweeted out the other day, FYI, I paid $11 billion in taxes last year.
And this year he's going to pay $17 billion, the most in history that anyone's ever paid.
Now, I want to know how that... there are ways to amplify that number or reduce it. I mean, he might include payroll taxes. He might include...
still taxes.
I agreed. And I don't think it changes anything.
He also employs over, 60 or 80,000 people.
Yeah, but can you imagine Elizabeth Warren? Can you imagine these
career politicians?
Hypocrite politicians. She's not just a career politician. She succeeded in getting a job by lying. I mean, you want to talk about freeloaders. She calls billionaires freeloaders. The government is the biggest freeloader on earth because they don't skip a paycheck. They get to inside trade day in and day out. Yeah. Elizabeth Warren is a particularly unique hypocrite, but she's talking about other people not paying their fair share. Their fair share pays their salary.
Exactly. Yeah, and you haven't paid a fair share because you can't, because everything you get, even if you pay it out, came from me.
Yeah, that's good. She pays taxes with not her, but with taxpayer dollars. But she dares. These people keep the system afloat.
And people are happy about it. People are like, yeah, tell Elon Musk to go fuck himself. He contributes nothing. How does he contribute? Forget money-wise. He's created businesses that employ people. I don't understand what you want from human beings.
I'm not prepared to forgive Bezos, but like
Bezos, I don't like as a person. I'll tell you this: I don't like him as a person. I don't like his demeanor. I don't like his censorship. He also, I feel, could pay people a bit more. He could, because he could go the Costco route. Make people who want to work at Amazon, this is the greatest job ever. He could, and he doesn't. So I don't like him for a lot of those reasons. However, it's not my money. It's not my business. If he wants, then people should leave and go somewhere else, or he could spend it wherever. As long as he's not doing anything illegal, if he's not robbing people, I can't comment.
No, and people they confound corporate taxes with individual taxes. So they say, "Oh, he paid no taxes," but they mean personal, not corporate. Yeah. But bottom line, even the Bezos of the world,
he still pays a lot of taxes.
Pay a lot of taxes. Employs a ton of people. Allows people to get pretty much whatever they want delivered on a Sunday afternoon. Whether or not you think that's exploitation is a separate issue. Yeah. But the people are still getting paid to do it, and it creates jobs. Unlike these government parasites who do nothing but investigate themselves, create stupid special committees to investigate events that they arguably may have had a hand in fomenting or creating.
Always.
They create their own work. They pay themselves to investigate themselves, and they do it with our taxpayer dollars. And then they come and say big business, which actually has a final product that is not useless corruption, that they're the ones not paying their fair share. What is the fair share, by the way, Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah,
is it all of it? Because they'll up and leave and enjoy your fair share of nothing.
Yeah.
Because when you kill the business and you kill the income, eventually you'll kill yourself as well. It's just the political elite will always survive a little bit longer until revolution.
They're making it seem, and they do it here in Canada too, they make it seem like the reason why the ultra wealthy are bad, they're not paying enough, we need more. They make it seem like it'll help you. That's what we need to take it from them, to help you. When in reality, the reason why they want it is to help themselves, because it's gotten so big. Government, their salaries, they need to justify, they need to pay them. All these stupid programs that don't actually work. So they're just trying to justify their paychecks and try to get more money. And that's all they're doing. They don't give a shit about you, because if they cared, every year, whenever they get their taxes, whenever money's in, it would go... It would make it so that here in Quebec, we didn't have that right before pandemic, 30% of kids going to school hungry. We wouldn't have that at all. It would be impossible to have that in Quebec, right? If our tax dollars are being used properly, that wouldn't happen.
Well,
Our hospitals here that they say they're understaffed, underfunded, how could they be underfunded? How are we giving money to other programs that aren't as important? Well, they're divisive.
They're understaffed because they tax people up the wazoo,
So
give
they
them
leave.
crappy work conditions, so they leave. And that's how it works. And yes, give us your money so that we will then, after we take our cut, after we take our waste, after we take our corruption, whatever's left, we'll re-inject into the economy. I don't need the government's middleman siphoning off of the wealth to do it. When you leave it to private enterprise, it tends to get done better than government. People don't trust private enterprise. Fine. If you don't trust private enterprise, why on earth would you trust government? It's humans at the end of the day. Humans are trustworthy or untrustworthy.
And you know the other thing about government that I got, every couple of months, whenever the occasion arises and someone's mad about, the government talks a lot of shit about teachers. The government talks a lot of shit about nurses, doctors, truck drivers. When when something's going on with them, they don't want to get vaccinated or they don't want to work under certain conditions. They talk shit about a lot of people that make every country run properly. Teachers, doctors, they talk a lot of shit and they don't want to help them. So if you're willing to try to justify your shitty job by talking shit about the people that actually make things run, you're not to be trusted. You're not to be trusted.
It's beyond that. I mean, they find ways. Can you just imagine Justin Trudeau, his mother and I think it was his mother and brother paid $250,000 in speaking fees from the We Charity, which we don't talk about anymore. The We Charity, given a sole source, no bid government contract to manage $1 billion that was given to them by taxpayers, paid $20 million to do it. They find ways to line their own pockets and their cronies. And then when it comes to clean air can I swear? I can swear. I can't do it. Clean air
in motherfucking schools.
Fucking schools. They don't have the money for that. Yeah. And
but that's what I'm saying. So then are the teachers crazy when the teachers complain? When you put it in the teachers' heads for a year that these kids will get infected, if they're close to you, they could kill you, they're gonna all that. You put the fear of God in these teachers. And then when you go back, when you ask them to go back to school, and the teacher's like, well, I don't know, am I allowed to go back to school? If I go in, am I going to get sick? And then you get mad at the teachers for not wanting to work under those conditions, as if the teachers are the bad guys. You just scared the shit out of them for a year. You told them you're not going to do anything to help the situation get any healthier or safer. And then you're mad that it's crazy.
It is divide and conquer, and the government does not thrive under peaceful circumstances because peace does not need to be maintained. It just needs to be preserved. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. Peace only needs to be maintained. Problems need to be resolved. So one is passive, the other is active. Government thrives on its active intervention. So create the problem, exacerbate the problem, and then pretend to be the solution to the problem. I got an email from one of my kids' schools saying, we're opening the windows a crack to increase ventilation. I was like, hey, how about you just fix up the systems in there? I mean, we know what the amount of money that was wasted on public contracts. We know the amount of money that these politicians are getting paid. How about you take a 10% pay cut until you solve the problems that you're elected to solve?
Yeah.
How about you do that? How about you skip your paychecks until you resolve the pandemic issues?
Nope.
Or until you come up? No.
They're going to wait for that week, and they're going to make the teachers the bad guy for complaining. Then a week later, they're going to make the parents the bad guy for asking for better conditions for their kids, and they're going to say, teachers, you should band with us. The parents are the bad guys. Then they're going to divide the doctors and nurses in the hospitals.
You missed a step.
That the nurses are asking for too much, they're complaining. When I know nurses that are like, we don't have enough people.
No.
They're double shifting.
Before they do that, they're going to make it illegal for parents to protest outside of schools because it's a COVID-related issue. Then they're going to empower the police to come down and slap $1,000 fines on the parents. Then they're going to empower the judiciary to impose these fines.
And the police aren't off the hook either, because every time the police think, oh, the government's on our side, then they're going to fuck with your pensions. That's what they do. They make everyone fight each other so that they don't realize that everybody should band together.
And then, by the way, they sprinkle in a little... Bill C-21 discriminatory law that bans religious garb in government work. Sprinkle in a little Bill 96 updating Bill 101 language rights. Sprinkle it all in there. Create and exacerbate the problems.
An explosive situation.
So that you're the solution. And then if people lash out, holy cows, unruly savages in this society, get the police in there, martial law, lock them down because they don't know that we know what's best for them and we know how to do it best. It's a vicious circle. And at some point, when people lose faith in the election process itself, that's when you start getting into risky territory. But my biggest concern is that, from what I see, it looks like the majority of Canadians, are now at a point where they want this. They feel so scared.
I think it's passive. People think, okay, if I close my eyes and just let it, let this finish, we're going to get back to normal. I'll comply to this, it'll go back to normal. So it's not compliance, a lot of it due to idiocy. It's more compliance due to fatigue. They're like, God damn, I just want it to end.
Yep.
So they're just regurgitating even though the news will say contradictory things, they'll repeat the contradictory information, which is what always shocks me. It's like, okay, look, I understand you want to be a little passive, but think about what you're saying. Just think about the logic.
Just think about, first of all, I've had this discussion with people and they say, be grateful. It could be worse. Your kids have food and they have a roof over their head. And I was like, true. But there's a difference between being grateful for certain essential things and saying, well, it's not hurting me that much, so I'm not going to complain. Like this pandemic, I don't go out. I mean, I've been married for 20 years. How long? No, I've been dating my wife for 22 years, but I don't go out. I don't go to bars. I don't go to gyms. My life has been minorly affected other than the psychological distress of seeing the society around me disintegrate. But there are people who are suffering. And it's not because I'm fortunate to be less impacted that I'm going to say, oh, I should be grateful, because that's
dangerous.
It's dangerous. The people who are not complaining are the ones who are either not impacted a lot, or actually benefiting from this. So you have a lot of people who it's easier to go get the CERB. Now they might get angry because CERB has been cut off.
Aren't they going to have to bring that back, though, again?
I don't know, but people, I don't know what's going to happen when people realize they have to pay tax on that. We'll see there. Then you have other people who are making a killing off of all of this. Online stuff. There are people who are doing good business with this. And other than the inconvenience...
How do I make a killing off this? You tell me.
Oh, I mean, first of all, you just have to have some connections with the government to get certain government contracts as relates to rapid tests, or as relates to certain services and contracts in relation to the response. If you're connected, you can make a killing off of this.
I have ordered rapid tests for us to be testing.
What's
rapidly.
the wait time? What's the wait time?
I ordered them from your guys. They said it should be around Christmas.
Okay, we ordered some more. But hey, rapid tests, they're free. They're giving them to you at school.
They announced that they're going to be free a day after I purchased $300 worth.
When the government says they're free, they're not free. It's just a different person paying for it, and you don't see it.
That's true, too.
They're paying for it, and they're going to pay more.
I paid for mine.
Yeah, they're going to pay. The government will pay more for the ones that they give away for free than you paid for your own. So
conspiracy here. Somebody brought this up to me. They assumed, and that somebody's Phil, who does the morning show with me. He assumed that the government might be giving these away because they're going to fudge the numbers, and some of these tests might always come back positive just to raise the numbers up. Do you think that's possible?
Look, conspiracy theory of today is headline news of tomorrow. I won't blame anybody for thinking that. The conspiracy theory that I might say is a little over the top is that they're all infected and they want to get people infected by doing.
I don't think so.
I know. I'm joking. I'm joking, people. That was a joke.
Because actually, if they're all infected and then you go through some,
then the vaccine becomes somewhat less useful.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are, you can always think of fun conspiracy theories. Or if it were a novel, what you would make for it to be an interesting science fiction novel. Yeah. There are known false positives with these tests.
It could happen.
Yeah, I can tell you, for the amount of rapid tests that I've done, I haven't gotten one false positive because I haven't gotten one positive yet. I'm wondering if they work at all, if they're just selling them to... But it's true. To get the numbers up, I don't think that's conspiracy theory, because you had Dina Hinshaw Alberta.
Makeup, yeah.
No, not even saying we don't even need to get a positive test. If you are missing work or missing school in an area that has been affected, we're going to deem it to be.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's not weird. It's corruption. I mean,
because aren't we supposed to rely on statistics? If you're fudging the numbers purposely, then these statistics none of them matter.
There's three types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. I mean, now that we've seen how the stats are abused, misrepresented, and then just ultimately modified in real time, change the definition of things, you affect all the numbers. But no, the rapid tests, yeah, they're free, except they're not free. And if you got that government contract, you're making a killing off of it. It's just taxpayer money. It's taxpayer money laundering. But so the people who've been doing well, or the people with the means to pay the $150 PCR test to go travel, to go through the inconvenience, or people with private means to get out, doesn't affect them. So they won't be vocal about it. But the bottom line, there's a lot of people who are tolerating this, and I think who now really are so abused. It's like Stockholm syndrome, where they just want direction and they just want to hope this time the people who have gotten it wrong for the last 2 years will get it right.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
To legalities of things. You saw, I think, recently that what was it, Bermuda? What was the country that escaped the wrath of the monarchy?
Bahamas?
What was it, Poseidon? Hold on. Let me search it up. Where's Rihanna from? It was Rihanna's country.
Okay.
I think it was the Bahamas. Barbados, that's it. So how come, after all these years, symbolically, we said we did it in the 80s, but not really, how come Canada doesn't follow suit and just cut ties completely?
You know, this came up in a discussion somewhere, and I don't know this enough to even offer an answer. I mean, I know that it's a symbolic connection that we have to the Queen. In theory, there are some residual powers that the Queen can exercise. Why don't we just sever all ties? I don't know, but look, it won't change anything. I'm not sure the Queen is no better or worse. Maybe she might be a little bit better than Trudeau. I don't know.
Well, we pay them. I think how many million does she get off us each year? 15 or some shit.
That's a drop in the ocean.
I'm just saying, we're paying them.
Yeah, but no, anyways, I don't know enough about that subject to even venture a guess. But no, what was that? The thing that I just saw the other day. Oh no, it was just Melanie Joly testing positive yesterday.
Oh, she has the COVID.
She's got the Rona, double vaxxed, and I read her response.
I don't know why people keep saying the double vax thing. It doesn't change it. You can still get coronavirus.
Well, no, what I just found amazing is reading her response and then reading. It was Elizabeth Warren who tested positive. It was yesterday or the day before. Cory Booker and another one. I forget the other person's name. Their public statements are cut and paste the same public statements.
Oh, what'd they say?
I'm grateful for having been double vaccinated, which has greatly reduced my symptoms, and everyone should get vaccinated and boosted. But I've tested positive, and I'm isolated. Whatever. It's just like I just wanted to throw that out there because it reminds me of the Simpsons episode where you're like, say the line, Bart, say the line, or the other episode where if you read their statements with a monotonous cult-like tone, it sounds like a cult.
Yeah, get your phone because there's a lot of cultiness going on. Poseidon, what were you saying?
Sorry, I'm just bringing up the royal family thing.
Bring it up.
So it's a little iffy because some people are saying it costs Canadians $58 million a year. There's someone else saying 43.
I know it's a few million that she gets. It's kind of like it's almost like we're paying her likeness fees.
Listen to this. Senator Warren. Today I tested positive with a breakthrough case. Thankfully, I am only experiencing mild symptoms and I'm grateful for the protection provided against serious illness that comes from being vaccinated and boosted. This is from Jason Crow, Democrat, Colorado. Says he has tested positive for coronavirus. I am thankful to be fully vaccinated and boosted and experiencing only mild symptoms. The vaccine is safe and effective.
That is weird. Yeah, they keep saying
this is from Cory Booker. Tested positive. I'm beyond grateful to have received 2 doses of vaccine and, more recently, a booster. I'm certain that without them, I would be doing much worse.
Very 1984.
And then I just said, say the line, Bart. Like, say the freaking line. Like, but the thing is, first of all, what I find suspicious...
I have a question. Another thing, breakthrough case. If, like, right here, 90% of people are double dosed, and we're still getting... They're no longer breakthrough cases. Well, they're the standard.
And I wasn't sure if breakthrough was someone who has already contracting it again. But
I thought it was double vax.
I think
that's how they're using it.
Okay, so that was the way I understood it. But so
it's no longer breakthrough. It's the.
Well, for goodness sake, I mean, 70% of the people who are, I believe it's in the UK, 70% of the people hospitalized are fully vaccinated.
That's not breakthrough.
But and now I say that not to say that the vaccine doesn't work.
No, I'm
it's just a matter, at some point, when everyone's vaccinated, the only people getting it are going to be fully vaccinated. It'll be 100%. Doesn't prove anything.
It doesn't prove it. It's no longer a breakthrough.
But it's first of all, I'm asking, why did 3 Democrats in one day test positive? I mean, were they vacationing? Were they doing things that they're telling us not to do? I'd like to know that. What treatments are they getting? I'd like to know that.
Why you're never going to know.
Why are they saying the exact same thing? And Melanie Joly, let me see what she said, because it was verbatim. And I asked if she what treatment she's getting, but I doubt I'll get an answer. Melanie Joly. This is Melanie Joly. I am grateful for the protection that vaccines offer us and encourage everyone to get vaccinated and boosted. It's the best thing we can do to keep our families safe this holiday season and all year long. 80+%, and they're shutting us down for the holidays. I mean, they think we're idiots. They think we're idiots and that we're not keeping track.
Well, because we kind of are.
Some people are. I mean, not idiots, but not keeping track. It's too much. People have jobs. People have kids. People do not have the luxury of their job being what you and I do, and maybe me more like.
Well, half my job is getting canned because a huge part of my job is going out to clubs, performing, the tour, all that, theaters. So if that can't, that's a huge portion of my income that gets slaughtered.
And people don't appreciate it. And I suspect I keep calling you Poseidon today
because you keep seeing him. He's on the corner. No,
it's the double.
He's dressed like The Rock today.
Well, he's dressed like a sprocket today, like all black and
with the chain, the
clothes. No, like when you for stand up, I presume. You have to pay attention to current events and understand them better than most people because that is a lot of subject matter that you would cover.
Yes.
So you're into this. You're dialed in. I'm dialed in. Most people are just not, and they rely on.
There are also comedians who are not dialed in.
Well, they are probably not the good comedians that anybody really wants to watch.
Yeah, they're not good. No.
Have that. I'm in trouble.
No, Poseidon knows what you're talking about. That's why he's laughing.
Well, I mean, the thing is, comedy is funny when it's relevant and poignant, not when it's
That's why they're unsuccessful. But it is funny. I see it sometimes. So we'll be at a regular mic or something, and we'll see them. They'll do the pandering to imbeciles, but then you'll see they'll lose their own crowd because the crowd's like, yeah, that's not true. Like you think you're pandering to us, but we're not stupid. Oh my
God, who was the Ruffin? Her name is Ruffin or Muffin? It's Ruffin.
I hope it's
Muffin. She did a bit after the Kyle Rittenhouse. Oh, we haven't touched on any of the lawsuits.
Yeah.
It was someone, Poseidon. It was on Peacock Network. Her name was Ruffin, I think. And she's a late night host. And this is supposed to be comedy.
I heard of her.
It's almost as funny as Colbert dancing with needles and singing Vaccine.
That was weird.
Weird is not the word. It's unfunny because they're out of touch. But she came out with a monologue and said, I don't know who has to hear this, and I have to say this, it's not okay to take a gun and shoot people. I was like, holy crap. This was after the verdict. And I was like, holy crap, you're not funny. You're not dialed in.
That's
you
not what
are
happened.
ignorant, and you are now misinforming whoever's watching. But
yeah.
No, that's it. To be a good comedian, you have to be smart, you have to be up to date, and you have to have a good take on things, because if it's a pandering SNL type take, it's not funny and people aren't going to watch it for very long.
It is shocking that when you get the updates, when you know what's happening, you won't change your jokes.
At some point, it's like you can see how people have to pander to their base, but that might also be why these bases are dwindling and people are just flocking unfunny comedy and not watching unfunny movies because, oh God, did you see the Seth Rogen and Sarah Silverman Christmas special?
Oh, that shit bombed hard.
It was. I don't get offended very easily.
I didn't watch it. Was it offensive?
No. I watched their stupid Twitter posts where they're referring to the Shabbos Goy and the things when they go out and accuse other people of white supremacy. They are the white supremacists in their demeanor, in their dialogue, in their perspective of the rest of the world. They are the people who think they are better and smarter than everyone around them.
Yeah, and Sarah Silverman got a taste of her own medicine because that's what happened to her a week later. I don't know if you saw that. One of the hosts of The View, I think, she criticized her, and then they called her a racist for criticizing a black woman.
The snake will eat its tail. The revolution eats itself, and the left, as we're seeing right now, all across the board, will eventually eat itself when they run out of targets on the right. A lot
of people think, oh no, if I just comply and agree with them, they're going to leave me alone. No,
until you say
because there's no logic.
Until you say one wrong thing.
Yeah.
The author there, who got into trouble on the trans issue.
Oh, J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling.
Who I've looked into, it still hasn't said anything hateful.
They called Joe Rogan a transphobe for saying that a biological male who transitioned or whatever should not be competing with biological females. Yeah. And That makes you a transphobe?
That's not a crazy statement.
Or that a biological male who's transitioned to a female swimmer and devastating the field of all former records, maybe there's something going on there. And that makes you a transphobe. To say you want to protect the rights of biological women, you're a transphobe. Whereas I might raise the argument that if you want to trample on the rights of biological women, you're a misogynist. And if you think that literally, having born biological males who transition, competing against biological females, cracking their skulls in the UFC, literally, destroying their records in swimming, literally, and you say that something is. My argument is for everyone who trusts the science, if they have testosterone limits for biological males who transition and then compete in women's sports, if they have testosterone levels, they recognize there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I asked the rhetorical question, if a biological male who, for whatever the reason, has testosterone levels below the limits that would apply to trans athletes, but doesn't identify as a woman, could that athlete then compete in women's sports? Like, what is the line? Is the line the
identification or the medical differences?
Or the medical? And if gender is a social construct and and it's a fluid thing, why even have the testosterone limits? Like, you're recognizing a biological difference, and you're just
by the way, I have a question. If gender is a social construct, then wouldn't people transitioning be guilty of appropriation of gender?
That joke, by the way, that observation, that humorous observation, has been around. Like,
it's humorous, but I'm just saying, if we're going to use stupid things like that,
gender is a social construct. There's no such thing, and yet you're transitioning from one of those genders to the next.
Yeah.
So
I have no issue with. I don't give a fuck. All I'm saying is people who try to demonize anyone that criticizes something that make, like, for example, J.K. Rowling, I think she was criticizing the fact that prisoners were allowed, even if if a criminal was a rapist, he was allowed right now, I think in Scotland, to identify as a woman right away with no transition, no hormone replacement, none of that stuff, and just go to a women's prison. So she said, isn't this a little fucking crazy? Like, shouldn't there be a limit? Like, you gotta, because it's like they're just taking advantage of it. Like, there's actual trans people, and then there's people who are trying to game the system. Prisoners, let's say,
and
for example.
who was it? Someone that did.
And then they called her a transphobe for that, but that's... I think the people she's talking about aren't even trans. I don't think a guy that's out there raping people and then as soon as he gets arrested, he's like, yeah, I'm actually a lady. I don't think that's a real trans person. Because it's a real thing.
No, but the label of a transphobe is just that. It's the racist, it's the misogynist, it's just to discredit an individual so that you don't have to debate the ideas. Yeah. Are there bona fide transphobes out there? Absolutely. Should someone be judged for being trans? Absolutely not. Are there biological differences that even the athletic competitions acknowledge? Yes. And so therefore, at some point, like, physical criterion or biological differences become relevant at a certain point. Yeah. And when they do, that's when it becomes relevant to consider them. Do you consider them for issues where they're not relevant? That would make you something of a discriminatory individual. When you consider
like, I don't want to hire my secretary even if it's the best one. I don't want to hire my secretary because the person's trans, or my producer here if the producer's trans. That's discriminatory.
Where the distinction is irrelevant to the practice, to the field, it's discriminatory. Where it's relevant, I mean, there's justified discrimination in the legal sense in a number of areas. You don't have blind bus drivers.
Yeah.
You don't have people who can't complete certain tests perform as firemen.
Yeah, I get it. So you don't have people that are scared of fire become firemen.
So but there have been funny lawsuits where they said, like, I don't want to go to the fire because I have a preference not to, but I want to be hired by the fire department. You have those outlier cases, but distinctions. A difference in treatment when the reason for which the treatment is different is irrelevant to the context, that's discrimination. When it is a relevant factor, scientifically, medically, and people recognize it, calling someone a transphobe for pointing that out is just to abuse of language, to demonize people so that you can avoid the debate and then, push whatever the other agenda would be, which is, Tim Pool says it tongue-in-cheek, but biological men are better at sports, that female sports, than females. Biological females. I mean, so
true.
You get into that realm where, under the pretext of being tolerant and not a transphobe, you are being intolerant and a misogynist and basically denying women's rights. And so you're doing something wrong when, in defending one person's rights, you're violating another's.
Which is a slippery slope. I personally kind of don't care. As long as no one's being a victim of anything, like if it's not in the sports world, you're not beating women up, I don't care.
It's not. This is another thing. It's none of my business.
Yeah.
I would never think to ask someone's gender. I would never think to ask someone's sexual orientation. I would never think to.
It's none of my business.
Hey, if it becomes relevant in the discussion because we want to understand each other, fine. But like, it's not. I wouldn't ask for that information. I wouldn't expect anyone to elect that information. But
I don't give a shit about your religion, your sexual orientation, because it's not going to make a difference in my like, for example, if I'm hiring someone here, let's say, that's never, like, when we bring people in or guests, so that never comes up because it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
And again, the only reason it might come up is if they say, I'm religious and don't work on the Sabbath.
Okay,
then,
cool. Thank you for letting me know. You're not working on fucking Fridays or Saturdays,
but
whatever.
This is the, I just had, what I was going to say.
I don't give a shit.
Hold on. Yes, sorry. This is the catch-22 paradox of your position. And I say the same thing. I don't care about, it's not that I don't care. It's none of my business.
Unless it
religion,
affects
race, orientation, gender, none of my business. But someone's going to say that is the white privilege thing to say. You only get to say it's none of my business because you haven't lived that experience. Then the flip side is, if I make it my business, then it's discrimination as well. Then it's like, why is that relevant? You either see color and you're racist, or you don't see color and you're racist. And so the framing of the debate is just to discredit the positions. But yeah, as far as it goes, considering irrelevant factors in a decision-making process taints the decision-making process. Yeah. Considering relevant factors is just called rational critical thought.
If I had an opening for a position and the best person to come in was, let's say, a trans woman, and I'm like, but they're trans, that's a problem. That's me being a fucking asshole. Like, especially if I'm not taking the best person for the position. But for me to just, like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. Don't. It's none of my business. I don't give a shit.
No, and it's like, but when it becomes relevant in sport, and there's very few contexts in which it becomes relevant. The question is then...
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not in that world. No, so for me, it shouldn't be... I don't give a fuck. What does it change?
No, people will say it changes something for you when they tell you how to refer to them, but some people always have names. For even the most reluctant, people have first names. But no, that's the thing. It's like, but the issue...
What do you want me to call you? That's it. Now we know.
You know, the funny thing is, growing up, you go to high school, the way people pick on you is by identifying you by irrelevant traits, religion, height, strength, whatever. And that's the result when you just objectify humans to these immutable or sometimes mutable traits. You ignore the human.
Yeah.
David, and we are humans and we talk to each other. But the underlying issue becomes, at least with respect to the trans sports issue, is how do they compete? And it's more specifically biological males transitioning to females. How do they compete without, in a meaningful sense? You can't say create their own league because there would not be enough participants. So there's a thorny question.
Well, here's my stance on that. I say let the people in the sport, the women that are competing and the people that run it, let them get organized together. Because if the women really feel scared or they don't want, then don't fucking compete. You know what I mean? Then pull out. So then they have to change the rules. Something like that. But it's none of my business to get in there and be like, they should do this. Fuck, they're doing their own thing. I'm not going to go criticize someone else's podcast on what they should do and what they shouldn't. They're not going to come. Do your own fucking thing. As long as no one's getting hurt, or if there's danger of getting hurt, they're taking care of it. That's your fucking business.
I would just go more scientific. Gender being a social construct, fine. Sex is not. So have your sports XX and XY, and then avoid.
And maybe
debate.
that's the way to solve. I don't give a fuck either way.
Not men's and women's sports. XX, XY. But then there might be the issues as to people with actual. Are there people with mixed chromosomes like XXY or?
I got one here with a missing one.
So, but it's an interesting. There's the underlying thorny question: how do the people who fit within this category compete in a sense that's fair? But everyone, the slightest disagreements. And this is when the left.
Yeah, you're a phobe or whatever. You could disagree on stuff. You could talk about shit.
Yeah, you can't say I will not deal with individuals because of these immutable traits. That makes you. And I have an underlying theory. There's no racist, xenophobe, trans. There's just assholes. And so you say I won't deal with you because of a specific trait. I don't believe for one second that someone who's like bona fide racist says I will not be friends with black people or I won't be friends with a Jew. I don't believe that they don't adopt that same idea with a different groups.
For sure.
And so. Racists, xenophobes, transphobes, there are just people who are tolerant and there are people who are intolerant.
Yeah. Like if you tell me right now, look, I don't know, you're like, he's like, I don't know, it's a woman and she tells me, I don't want to compete, I don't want to wrestle with the trans woman because I'm scared or whatever, I'll be like, makes sense, I'm cool with that. But if you tell me, I'm not going to hire that fucking tranny, then I'll be like,
I'm not going to a bar that lets those people in. I mean,
yeah, then I'm gonna be like, then I'm not on board, bro.
No, it's where things have. It's just the bottom line. It's like you're denying the science. It's either there is no distinction or there is, and the very rules that they put into place highlight the distinction. And now you just have the swimming federation. I forget who it was, but in the context of Leah Thompson, saying basically biological males who transition, they effectively have a doping advantage over biological females. And so, whatever. But it's just discourse has been ruined by social media because social media was not meant for nuanced, understanding discourse. It was meant for rewarding the wrong behavior when it comes to discourse. And typically the responses that get those responses are the wrong responses.
Yeah, always. Now I have a question about this Rittenhouse kid.
Oh, yeah.
What he's doing? He's making money. He's suing everyone.
I don't think he's suing anybody. I don't think he's going to make that much money by suing them. It might be questions of principle. When you're criminally prosecuted, you're going to have a hard time showing that you've suffered defamatory damages as a result of the statements that were made at the time. They can still be defamatory, but you're not going to get rich doing it, and that's even if you succeed.
Interesting.
But typically, once you've been criminally prosecuted, it's going to be very difficult to say that was defamatory when they called me a white supremacist who murdered.
Even though there was no evidence.
Not only was there no evidence, anybody who knew the evidence knew that it was the exact opposite. Kyle Rittenhouse, if he's not mixed race, I don't know if Latino is a race, but I believe he's part Latino or has Latina in his family.
I don't care. Even
and
if
he shot 3 white guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
and people didn't even know that.
Defending an Indian guy's store.
Defending an Indian guy's store, and the 3 white guys that he shot, one was one was a convicted pedophile.
However, even though I'm with you on this, he didn't know about that.
True.
This was what I like to call a happy accident.
No. I wouldn't even call it a happy accident. What I would call this as it doesn't factor into his decision-making process the evening of, but it certainly factors into the public's perception of the incident when the media knew it and actively withheld it from the population.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so then you have people thinking he shot 3 innocent black people at a BLM protest.
Yeah, why is that still a thing?
By the way, so what's his name? Joseph Rosenbaum. A child rapist of the worst order, convicted. Anthony Huber, a repeat domestic abuser, threatened to kill his grandmother, held a knife to his brother's throat, repeat domestic abuser. Jesus. And Grosskreutz had no real serious felonies, but was the guy who got his arm blasted off because he was carrying a concealed carry Glock, despite not being allowed to do so because of certain criminal issues. So the 3 people that Rittenhouse killed while they were violently pursuing him were 3 criminals who were quite clearly there for no legitimate reason other than to raise hell. They were at a BLM protest, but they weren't there for BLM reasons. But you see, even leading into the trial, even after the trial, the Independent said Rittenhouse shot 3 black people at a BLM protest.
Really?
Literally. I couldn't believe it. Screenshot.
Okay, so this he can't sue.
He could sue, but what's he gonna get? Like, what's the damages to him? That's the issue. So nominal damages, yes, but they corrected it. What's the word? When something is not clear, ambiguously. They corrected it to say he literally retracted the headline. 3 people at a BLM protest.
To make it still seem...
Still sounds like... That's the connection I would make if I didn't know any better. But that was... So getting to some legal stuff, that was the big one since we last spoke. And then, getting to government corruption and the sickness of the world. You have the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. If it didn't wind up yesterday...
The tracker kept getting deleted on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Ghislaine Maxwell trial tracker, deleted, reinstated... Anything to frustrate. Oh, because he violated some rules. He may have violated some rules. I don't know. Because at one point in this trial, Maxwell trial was a federal case, so not broadcast. There was a lot of gag orders or redaction in the trial. Apparently, the defense attorney did accidentally, although maybe not so accidentally, mention the names of the Jane Does who were testifying without revealing their identity. So in theory, if he did repeat that information, it would be a problem. But it's very suspicious. My videos on the subject were demonetized and then remonetized afterwards, except for one stream, which was still demonetized. It was quite clear what was going on. But that trial itself is as close to a cover-up of a prosecution as you can possibly get. For anybody who doesn't know, Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of sex trafficking, participating with Epstein, who everyone knew did it, didn't kill himself or did kill himself, whatever. So there's only one person left to prosecute. Except, all of those people for whom that were procuring the services that Epstein and Maxwell were providing.
Yeah.
And the prosecution in this case goes after Maxwell, calls 4 witnesses, only 2 of which were actual victims in the sense of being underage at the time, because the other 2 were legal at the time, so not technically victims under the law, at least under the law for which Maxwell is being prosecuted. They call minimum amounts of witnesses, redact everything, redact everything in that infamous black book in Epstein's that has all these names, including Alec Baldwin.
Including Prince Andrew,
No.
Oprah,
In
Bill
fairness,
Gates.
the black book represents nothing incriminating on its own. But
All it represents is who he knew.
no, who he knew, or he might have just put their names in there. Who knows? But to redact it is the suspicious part, and all of it. So they redacted the names of the witnesses. The black book. I mean, it was this was done under the cloak of darkness. The judge, basically conducted the trial in such ways to potentially get a conviction against Maxwell, and then everyone's going to wash their hands. James Comey's daughter is the prosecuting attorney. The prosecuting attorney is James Comey's daughter, Maureen Comey, prosecuting Maxwell for crimes that, there's a picture out there of Bill Clinton getting a back massage by it's either Virginia Guffey or Virginia Roberts.
Yeah, I shared it.
It's arguably, potentially, if you want to think conspiratorially, the daughter of James Comey, the most corrupt FBI agent, tied with all the other ones, prosecuting a case ostensibly in a way to not go after the beneficiaries of the alleged trafficking services procured by Ghislaine Maxwell. Come to your own conclusions.
It's crazy.
And then the other interesting legal one to finish it up. What was it? Oh, the Kim Potter trial, the taser cop.
Who's taser cop?
So this is a woman who was pulling over a 18-year-old kid named Dante Wright.
Dante Wright.
Thick criminal history that the cops knew of at the time of pulling him over. Violent criminal history, inch thick criminal history. They knew it while they were pulling him over. This was in Minnesota. It was in Minnesota. I might get it wrong on the state. Pulling him over, resisting arrest. Again, he resisted arrest previously in the past. As he's driving off in his car with cops trying to stop him, reaching into the car.
A chase.
No, the cop, Kim Potter, pulls out what she thought was her taser.
Oh, I remember this, and she shot him.
Taser. Oh shit,
yeah.
I just shot him. And then he drives off, crashes, and dies.
I remember her,
So that trial's going on right now. Another trial.
What's happening with that? Do we know anything more? I remember when that happened. She's a bit of a dummy.
First of all,
because she thought she pulled out the wrong weapon, that's incompetent.
If you've seen the tasers versus the guns, you would say that might be a more forgivable mistake because I've never seen a taser that looks more like a gun than the one in this particular case.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's one argument. Second argument is she was already entitled to use lethal force because it was active resisting arrest, placing other officers at risk. So that's the argument that the defense is basically going with, is that lethal force would have been used anyhow. And so the fact that she tried to go with less lethal and screwed up, I mean, even good on her for trying to give the kid an extra chance, but she would have been justified to shoot him anyhow because of the circumstances. The prosecution was trying to show that the cops weren't in the car, their shoulders weren't in the car. They were not.
Even if he drove off, they weren't in danger.
In theory, but we'll see what happens. But this is just another case where, had the media just represented fairly what happened instead of trying to weaponize it for political, ideological purposes.
I just remember feeling that she was incompetent. That's what I remember. I don't remember anything race related about it.
No, and I just remember her thinking she was incompetent, but also thinking that this was a case of police brutality where it was unwarranted under the circumstances. This is one of those cases where his criminal history is relevant because they knew it at the time. So they're responding to someone they know is violent, knows resists arrests. Compared to Rittenhouse, he was just responding to violent people who he didn't know were pedophiles, domestic abusers. So that judgment has not come down, but they're both going to deliberation if they haven't already. And it's an interesting time to be alive, to get to follow these things in real time. The YouTube law community, of which I'm now a part, has been covering all these things. So whatever your interests are, there is a niche on YouTube of YouTube law, and it's people can be informed if they want to be.
You know what I like about everything we spoke about? It does seem, and again, it just seems conspiratorial, but it does seem like what's nefarious about this is they want people to fight each other. So they want people to fight about race. They want you, trans, no trans, like this and that. Like, what the fuck do you care if someone's trans or gay or straight?
It is
divide. Fuck do you care? Why would a great person, but they're straight or they're gay or they're trans, why would that dictate? It's like they want us to all hate each other for these arbitrary reasons, so that we don't turn our heads and be like, wait a second, the fuck's going on over here? What are you guys doing?
I will agree with that. I will also agree that it's just good for ratings.
But it's bad because you're brainwashing imbeciles. Because a lot of idiots who just take that in. They're like, black people are the enemy, white people are the enemy, trans are the enemy. It's like, no.
Pantelis.
The enemy are the people feeding you this bullshit.
Pantelis. Jussie Smollett. That verdict.
Yeah, there you go.
After the verdict, BLM comes out and says it doesn't matter. We don't ever believe the cops. We only believe Jussie Smollett. And then some people who,
as my friend Preach said, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit.
Some people who are smarter than me said, well, if you don't trust the police, who are you going to trust to prosecute Jussie Smollett's bona fide hate crime?
Yeah.
The media thrives off of this because they make money off of it. If they had been a little more skeptical and not jumped on the bandwagon of the Jussie Smollett now confirmed hoax hate crime, first of all, they wouldn't have been able to virtue signal the way celebs did. The modern day lynching of Jussie Smollett. They wouldn't have been, politicians would not have been able to weaponize it the way they did to try to push through legislation.
Apparently he jerked the dude that beat him up off right before it.
I have not heard that.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, like that was part of the thing that came out is that he, like, and people were like, so what you're saying is he did try to beat off his attackers.
I was following that day in and day out. I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, because and that's another thing. It's like they were very close.
Well, I heard the close part, and where he said, "I didn't know the other brother, but I spent the day driving around with him smoking weed." Which, but no, the lunacy of that case is, first of all, what happened in the beginning. The media jumping on the bandwagon, uncritically thinking whatsoever. Politicians jumping on, trying to weaponize it for political purposes. Other people jumping on, trying to weaponize it for virtue signaling, promoting a narrative that, if you have to rely on fake hoax hate crimes to, condemn hate crimes, you can start asking yourself some questions. But
yeah. Nigerians are the problem.
No,
they went in there.
There were a lot of people made a lot of good jokes about
the first time Nigerians get scammed by an American. Yeah,
I don't make these jokes, but I do have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But it's like all of these situations, they get jumped on for the exact same reason. Rittenhouse, the same reason. The media makes money off of it. Politicians get to divide and conquer, push policy. Celebs get to feign virtue by condemning things that didn't happen. Things that, if they had happened, we would all condemn. It's like Philip DeFranco condemning hate with Nicholas Sandmann, and then he finds out the kid's totally innocent. He's like, well, I stand by my original statement of condemning hate. It's like, you know what? I don't need you to condemn hate. If I suspected
That's
you
why
wouldn't,
it's called hate, yeah.
If I suspect you wouldn't condemn hate, I don't care that you're saying this. I still think you're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it's a system. It's an ecosystem, and it plays itself out the same way every time. And just hopefully by us covering this and discussing it, people will be just a little more skeptical the next time they hear of a hate crime. And this is a terrible thing. People will be more skeptical the next time they hear of a hate crime.
And it might be a real fucking hate crime.
And now by having promoted these fake stories, you now actually victimize bona fide victims going forward. So congratulations, media.
The one last thing I could give to people, and again, I'm an idiot, however, is all these divisions that they've put into you to see people, like to see people as he's a Jew, he's a Greek, all those divisions. This is why you should kind of forget them, because the government, even though they pretend they don't see it, they kind of don't see the division, but in the sense that you're all idiot peasants. You're all together, divide amongst yourselves while we fuck around here. That's what's really happening. Because all the big decisions, when they're made and like they're passing laws and they're trying to divide, if everyone was united and they realized that's all bullshit, this shit wouldn't fly. But we're so busy arguing about nonsense, arguing about Elon Musk, how much he's going to pay in taxes. It's like a sleight of hand. It's like they're magicians. Forget all that shit. None of it really matters. That divisive shit doesn't actually matter.
They fabricate the crisis so that they can pretend to be the solution while they do all of their corrupt business behind closed doors. I mean, that is the world. I mean, I don't think it's ever been any different. I don't think it's ever going to change. But at the very least, people can be a little bit more aware of it. They create the problem to regulate the solution while they continue doing all the corrupt stuff they've always been doing behind closed doors, whether it's Trudeau, whether it's I can't think of another one, but anyways, all of them. It's just the ecosystem.
What's the over-under on them banning this episode?
Are you going to put this on YouTube?
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be demonetized.
It's going to be demonetized.
The only thing the wheel in my head is always spinning as to how someone can take what I just said out of context to try to harm me. But that is the world in which we live. It's just, you got to always weigh your words, but you can never weigh them heavily enough, because someone who wants to misunderstand can misunderstand, and that's it. Just have to walk. You have to walk that line and just be honest and true, and hope for the best.
I like it. That's a good closing statement. Viva Frei links are in the description. Thank you, Viva.
Pantelis, pleasure.
We've built this prison cell 'cause we can't trust ourselves. Critically shamed and all our faith. Soul systems advocated by sin. We're selling plastic dreams,